De-stressing for the NHS with your host, Dr. Phil Parker.
Hi, in this episode we're going to talk about how to deal with other people. Now, one of the things we know about other people is sometimes they can be wonderful, sometimes they can be dealing with their own stuff, which makes them a little bit more difficult to be with. And as we said right at the beginning, that could include both your team, family members, as much as with patients and clients. One of the issues we have is we have to deal with them. We have to find a way to be there as well as we can, even when they can be in a bit of a difficult state themselves. The other thing we have, of course, is that we can take away those conversations and replay them in our heads afterwards. And all these things just grind us down a bit. So we're going to cover some tips and tools to help make that easier to manage how to deal with other people's stuff. And the first thing, of course, is to really recognize that a lot of the time it is other people's stuff. Although it can feel like it's your fault or you're to blame, really distinguish whether it's somebody who's just not in a very good state emotionally, a bit burnt out, a bit stressed, a bit unhappy, and whether that's just them expressing that as opposed to whether it's really your fault or your problem. So we've got to look at some ways to resolve that. Let's start with the first one. One of the things we recognize is people can set us off into feeling difficult around them because of stuff that's happened in the past. And this shows up really clearly when, for instance, let's say we don't have a great relationship with somebody on a team, then we can still be thinking about them even when they're not there, when they're not on shift. Like if they were here, they'd be saying this thing, or when they come back. So we can recognize how much of this is internally driven, the way we're thinking about it. So we can do some work on changing how we feel about them so that when we next meet them, we'll be in a much better state, a much better situation. And that can apply not just to individuals, but a kind of group of people. So people who are angry, people who are frustrating, we can change how we feel about them. So what I'd like you to do is think about somebody who either in the past or currently you found a bit difficult to be with. As you think about them, just notice, where do you see them? Where do you see them in space? Are they above you, to your left, to your right, straight in front of you, in your face? Just notice where you think, when you think about them, where they pop up from. And as you see them, there's a couple of interesting things to notice. The first thing is, if they're above eye level, it will tend to be someone that you feel makes you or tries to make you feel inferior. If they're bigger than real life, that will again make you feel kind of overwhelmed by them. So all you need to do is to shrink them down to the size of a peanut and have that peanut just drop to the floor. So it's off there, usually your left is best, on the left-hand side, on the floor, about 2 meters away from you. And as you see it there, shrunk down to the size of a peanut, 6 feet, a couple of meters away from you, just notice, how does that feel? You should find that feels much more comfortable for you. Like it feels like there's a sense of relief and a sense of space. Then have that peanut roll further and further and further and further and further away. So now it's a couple of miles away, a couple of kilometers away. When you look at it from here, watching them over there, just notice, how does this feel? How does that change? And then have them take a plane and go all the way to the other side of the world. And when they're over there, again, notice, how do you feel? Now, what's interesting is we haven't obviously changed anything about the relationship, haven't dealt with any of the miscommunications, but what's happened is it changes how we feel about them when we think about them. It just don't seem to have so much interest, so much emotional charge for us. And that then means when we next bump into them, we'll be in a very different space, a different state, and we'll be able to relate to them in a slightly different way. As I say, you can use this for specific individuals, or if you just think there's a type of person that you've come across, someone who's a bully or a bigot or someone who's just emotionally quite unmanaged. You do the same for this type of person, so that when you do come in contact the next time, you feel like you've got this distance. So it's like it's occurring, but you somehow feel insulated from it. And this is a really valuable skill, of course, if you're having to bump into people like this. So try this out. Next time you find someone who's a bit tricky, just take a few moments. You may not be able to do it in the moment, you may have to do it afterwards, but it will allow you to shrink down the emotions, give yourself some distance, so that when you bump into these people, they don't bend you out of shape in the same way, that you can carry on feeling more in your own space, protected, thoughtful, reflective, in a way that makes you feel good about yourself.
I do hope you found this episode useful. Please do share it widely with your friends and family. And thank you for everything you do.